All right, so here's our first video on the Behringer X-Touch. We have the X-Touch full size here, and we'll go over the setup of how it's working with the XR18. So the first thing you're going to have to do is make sure that the X-Touch has 1.15 firmware, and you'll want to go to Behringer's website and then just make sure you download 1.15. There are not any instructions on how to update, so I'll go over those pretty quick here. You're going to want to hold the display button down while you power up the unit. And when you do that, it'll show you what firmware you have. The next thing you're going to want to do is download a Midi system exclusive Librarian so that you can load the sysx file from the download and upload it into the Behringer via USB. So make sure you just do a computer USB to the X-Touch USB. Open up one of your programs. Behringer recommends Midi OX for Windows and Snoi's sysx Librarian for Mac OS. So here's a picture of what it looks like. You're going to open up the program in Mac OS here. You're going to navigate to the sysx file that you downloaded. You're going to load that. You're going to go to the Update pull-down menu, hit Update. With your file selected, hit the play button, and you should see it start sending information. It took about 2 minutes, and you will see your display over in this area show some progress. And after 2 minutes, you should be good. Turn your unit off and on, and when you turn it back on, you should see the 1.15 firmware version. All right, and of course, the next thing you're going to want to do is make sure you update your XR to 1.12. And you'll do that by downloading the software again from Behringer's website, getting it to your hard drive, unzipping it, and then launching the XR application, going to your setup. And when you go into setup, you will see the current firmware version right here. If it's not 1.12, you click Update Firmware. You'll navigate to your Downloads folder where it was unzipped, and then select that update. It'll update via Wi-Fi, and you'll be finished. So at that point, you've got all the technical criteria to get this done. So once you're updated to 1.15 on X-Touch and 1.12 on the XR, you'll want to get either 2 Midi cables or a Ethernet cable. I used Ethernet cable out of the X-Touch into my router, and then out of the router into the remote Ethernet input on the XR18. Make sure you flip over your switch to Ethernet, and you should be good to go there. Now, the next thing you want to do is restart your X-Touch by holding Channel 1 Select button down. So while holding the Select button, hit the power button. You saw 1.15 flashed up pretty quick there. So I'm in X control. I'm on network and not MIDI. And then I have got IP address was scanning. So let's go ahead and go to DHCP. DHCP is on. All right, and then once that's done, you can hit scan by pushing down the rotary on number 8. And of course, it found everything, and we've got control now. So once you get the technical stuff out of the way, you should be up and running, and now you can start experimenting with what does this thing control and how does it do it. Now there is a cheat sheet, an overlay cheat sheet that kind of gives you the overview of what it's actually controlling. But let's just start out with the basics here. Obviously, we've got 8 channel motorized faders plus a master. We can select any of our channels. Once we select those, then the parameters that we select over here will control just that channel. We have standard mute, and of course when I soloed, I lost myself there. And we have got a record function here, and that's going to be really a variable that does several different things once we're into the Encoder Assign section. So what you're going to notice here is that these function keys are called encoder assigns. They're basically function keys for what these encoders do and what the record button does. And we'll go over that in a second. So the first thing you should realize here is your standard mode is the global view. You might want to make sure you're always there and you're not over here in one of these modes, and that's home right there. And when you're in the global view home position, everything here is going to work just like you expect. Record will not do anything. Solo, mute, and of course your select. Fader is going to control volume, and your encoders up here are going to be defaulted to pan. And you'll notice that as I turn this, And you can see that I'm controlling pan left and right on channel 3 here. And the cool thing, a quick shortcut is if you just push the encoder and click it in, it defaults back to center. So that'll quickly get you back to where you want to go. The other cool thing is the Scribble Strips are just like the XR12. So everything that we see up here on our screen is going to be on our Scribble Strip as well. So we can see the names of our tracks and the color coding. That's a really cool feature. The shuttle knob here and this area does nothing at this point, but I've got a few suggestions on making these do some things. Your fader banks do exactly what you'd think they would do. Channels 1 through 8, 9 through 16, and then over here you're going to get your 17 and 18, and then you're going to have your 4 effects returns. So here's 1, 2, 3, and 4. I've got all of those muted, and you can hear the effect. So 4, and then finally, so we have 3 banks of inputs, and we have our 2 banks of outputs. And those outputs are our 6 buses, nothing here on 7, and it is showing left-right here. The cool thing about this left-right is you actually see your output level. If you don't have it, there is no output level anyplace else, so it's probably not a bad thing to reference this bank so that you can see your master output level if you're not next to an iPad or something. So that's kind of cool. And then the last set is going to be your effects, and these are the effects sends and our 4 DCAs that we can assign. So one suggestion that I had is now at this point we are flipping through a lot of banks, and that's a little bit cumbersome live. So we have 3 input banks and 2 output banks. This simply goes through 1 channel at a time. I would probably never use that. I'm going to suggest to Behringer that they actually make these 2 buttons simply input faders and let us use this as output, or since none of these are being used, I would love to be able to have a direct access to my output. And then I also noticed that they don't have access to the 2 user banks, which would be really great to be able to take the programming that we can do over here in utility on the user bank and take that bank. So this is bank number 1, user bank, go to utility, number 2. So these are my custom user banks that I created over here in the XR software that we don't have access to. So it'd be a really awesome upgrade to let us have access to output banks 1 and 2, and then user banks 1 and 2 here possibly. And that way I would not have to go over here and cycle 1, 2, 3, 4 times to get to my DCAs. And we're going to always want to have quick access to DCAs. I would love to be able to hit that button right there and go directly to my output DCAs, and hit this button and it would go over to my bus outputs and my master left right here. So I think that could be done, and that still keeps these 2 with your channel inputs. If you want to scroll 1 at a time, that'd be great. But since these aren't implemented, those could be output access buttons. The control and shuttle area here does work on the XR12 and 16, and it controls the playback, rewind, fast forward, and recording of the USB stick. So these are all cool functions. These transport buttons here do not work on the XR18. This entire function, modify, automation, and utility section does work. We'll go over that. None of these buttons are assigned except for global. And of course, we have this display button. This button is used to clear solos. And if I've got a bunch of solos, I can do a clear all. So keep that in mind. It's just one option. And there'll be a lot of functions going on here that we'll go over.